The woman standing in Evan Brooks' living room wore nothing but his shirt and shame, her bare feet pressed against the cold wooden floor. Her arms hung at her sides like broken wings. Dawn light caught the purple bruises climbing her collarbone, disappearing beneath faded cotton that swallowed her frame whole. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there in the center of his modest cabin, looking like someone who'd finally stopped running but hadn't yet figured out how to stand still. This is a story about the kind of mercy that asks no questions, about a single father who opened his door to a stranger's pain, about survival, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to choose trust after the world has taught you fear. Stay with me until the end, and if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far stories like this can travel. Evan Brooks woke at 5:47 a.m. to absolute silence. Not the comfortable silence of a sleeping house, not the peaceful quiet of early morning solitude. This was different. This was the silence of someone holding their breath, afraid that exhaling might shatter whatever fragile thing kept them standing. He opened his eyes to the dark wood beams of his bedroom ceiling, the same view he'd woken to for 6 years. The cabin he'd built with his own hands, the life he'd carved from grief and necessity after his wife died giving birth to their daughter. Everything in this house had its place, its rhythm, its reason, except for the woman standing in his living room. Evan sat up slowly, the bed springs creaking beneath him. Through the open bedroom door, he could see her silhouette against the window. She stood perfectly still, backlit by the pearl-gray light of pre-dawn. His blue work shirt hung to her knees. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her arms wrapped around her torso like she was trying to hold herself together with nothing but willpower and borrowed cotton. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Evan's mind raced backward through the previous 12 hours, sorting memory from the surreal feeling that he'd somehow stepped into someone else's life. The pier, the rain, the phone call that never connected, the choice he'd made that now stood barefoot and trembling in his living room. "I should go," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, rough from disuse or crying or both. "I'm sorry. I should go." But she didn't move. Her feet stayed planted on the worn floorboards his daughter had learned to walk on. Her eyes, dark and haunted, fixed on something beyond the window that Evan couldn't see. "It's not even 6, he said quietly. "Nothing's open yet. I'll wait somewhere." "Where?" She didn't answer, because there was no answer. Evan had lived in Pine Haven long enough to know there was nowhere to wait at 6 in the morning except the gas station or the diner, and both would ask questions a woman in an oversized shirt couldn't afford to answer. He stood up, reaching for the jeans he'd draped over the chair. "I'm making coffee," he said. "Then we'll figure it out." "You don't have to—" "I know." Something in those 2 words made her look at him directly for the first time. Really look. Not the panicked glance of someone calculating escape routes or measuring threat levels, but the careful, cautious assessment of someone trying to determine if kindness was real or just another trap wearing a gentle face. Evan kept his movements slow and predictable as he walked past her into the small kitchen. He filled the coffee maker with water, measured grounds into the filter, pressed the button. The familiar ritual grounded him, gave his hands something to do while his mind tried to catch up with the reality of the situation. A stranger was in his house, a hurt, frightened stranger who'd spent the night under his roof while his 6-year-old daughter slept in the room down the hall. The kind of decision that could destroy everything he'd built. The kind of risk a single father had no business taking. And yet, he'd seen her eyes last night. The particular emptiness that came from running on nothing but survival instinct and sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. He recognized it because he'd seen it in his own mirror during those first brutal months after Charlotte died, when every morning felt like choosing to keep breathing just because his daughter needed someone to pour her cereal. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. The smell of fresh brew filled the small kitchen. Outside the window, the forest was beginning to wake. Birdsong threading through the evergreens, mist rising off the creek that ran behind his property. "Do you take anything in it?" Evan asked. She stood in the same spot, watching him with the wary stillness of a deer deciding whether to bolt. "Black is fine." He poured 2 mugs, set them on the small wooden table he'd built from reclaimed barn wood, sat down in one of the mismatched chairs. waited. She moved like someone who'd learned to make herself small. Quiet steps. Shoulders hunched, eyes tracking every shadow and doorway. She took the chair farthest from him, closest to the exit. Her hands wrapped around the mug, but she didn't drink, just held it like the warmth itself was worth something. "My daughter will be up soon," Evan said. "She's 6. Her name is Sophie. She's going to have questions." "What are you going to tell her?" "That you needed help, that we're helping." He paused. "That's the truth, isn't it?" The woman's throat worked. Her knuckles went white around the ceramic. "I don't want her to be scared of me. Kids aren't scared of people who need help. They're scared of people who lie about it." Evan took a sip of his coffee, bitter and strong. "I'm not going to lie to my daughter." "I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to—" Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together hard, fighting for control. "I'm asking you to let me leave before she wakes up, before this becomes complicated." "It's already complicated," Evan said quietly. "You're here. That means something happened. Something bad enough that you were sitting on a dock in the rain at midnight with no shoes, no phone that works, and bruises you keep trying to hide." She flinched. The coffee trembled in her hands. "I'm not going to ask what happened," he continued, "and I'm not going to call the police unless you want me to. But I am going to offer you breakfast and a ride to wherever you need to go. And if you don't have anywhere to go, we'll figure that out too." "Why?" The word came out sharp, suspicious. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous." Evan met her eyes. "Are you?" "No." "Then we're starting from there." The silence stretched between them. Outside, a crow called through the morning mist. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, Sophie's alarm clock started playing its gentle melody, a music box version of some song Charlotte used to sing. The woman looked toward the sound. "She's awake." "She will be soon." Evan stood, moving to the stove. "I usually make pancakes on Saturdays. That okay with you?" "I can't stay for—" "You can stay for breakfast," he said firmly. "Everything else, we'll take one step at a time." He pulled out the mixing bowl, the flour, the eggs, moved through the familiar routine while his mind worked through the impossible math of the situation. A stranger in his house. A woman who clearly needed help but wouldn't ask for it. A single father who'd learned the hard way that sometimes the right choice looked like the reckless one. Behind him, he heard the soft scrape of her chair. For a moment, he thought she was leaving, gathering what little she had and disappearing back into whatever nightmare she'd escaped from. But when he glanced over his shoulder, she was just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the hallway like it was a portal to a world she didn't recognize. "The bathroom's the second door on the left," Evan said. "There's a spare toothbrush in the medicine cabinet. And if you want different clothes, my sister left some things here a few months back. They'd probably fit better than my shirt." She looked down at herself, seeming to register for the first time what she was wearing. The shame that crossed her face was so raw it hurt to witness. "I'll put them on the counter," Evan added quietly. "Take your time." "What?" She nodded once. Disappeared down the hallway like a ghost who'd been given permission to haunt. Evan released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He whisked the pancake batter with more force than necessary, trying to quiet the voice in his head that sounded suspiciously like every sensible person he'd ever known telling him this was a mistake. That opening his home to a stranger endangered everything he'd worked to build. That a single father couldn't afford this kind of risk. But Evan had learned 6 years ago that safety was an illusion, that life could shatter in a single moment, a complication during delivery, a heart that stopped beating, a world that went from complete to broken in the space between one breath and the next. He'd learned that sometimes the only thing you could control was whether you chose kindness or fear when someone needed you. "Daddy?" Sophie stood in the kitchen doorway, her dark curls wild with sleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit that went everywhere she did. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with the stars and moons that were getting too small, but she refused to give up. "Morning, Bug," Evan said, keeping his voice normal. "Pancakes? Is someone here?" She looked past him toward the hallway. "I heard talking. A friend needed a place to stay last night," he said carefully. "She's using the bathroom. She'll join us for breakfast." Sophie's eyes went wide. "A lady friend?" "Just a friend, Soph. Someone who needed help." His daughter processed this with the serious consideration she brought to everything. At 6, she already had her mother's thoughtful nature, the way Charlotte used to pause before speaking, measuring her words. "Is she nice?" Sophie asked. "I think so, but she's going through a hard time, so we're going to be extra kind, okay?" "Okay." Sophie climbed into her chair at the table, setting her rabbit carefully beside her plate. "What's her name?" Evan realized he didn't know. 12 hours he'd spent worrying about this woman, pulling her from the edge of the pier, driving her to his home, giving her his bed, and he'd never asked her name. The bathroom door opened, footsteps in the hallway, hesitant and soft. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing his sister's jeans and a faded green sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She'd washed her face, pulled her hair back. The bruises stood out more clearly now, a yellow-green shadow along her jaw, finger-shaped marks on her upper arms. Sophie stared with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. "Hi, I'm Sophie. What's your name?" The woman's eyes found Evan's first, seeking permission or perhaps escape. He gave her a small nod. "Your choice, your pace." "Lena," she said softly. "My name is Lena." "That's pretty." Sophie pointed to the chair beside her. "You can sit here if you want. Daddy makes really good pancakes. He always makes them shaped like animals, but sometimes they look like blobs instead." The ghost of a smile touched Lena's face. So brief, Evan almost missed it. But it was there. Proof that beneath the fear and exhaustion, someone was still home. She sat down slowly, like she'd forgotten how to move naturally through the world. Sophie chattered about her rabbit's name, Mr. Hopsworth, and her favorite pancake shape, butterflies, because they're the most delicate, and how her dad sometimes let her help flip them if she was very careful. Evan poured batter onto the griddle, trying to focus on the familiar task while his mind tracked everything else. The way Lena's hands trembled when she reached for her coffee, the way she positioned herself with clear sightlines to both exits, the way she listened to Sophie with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every detail in case she needed to remember this moment later. "Do you have kids?" Sophie asked suddenly. Lena's breath caught. "No. Do you want some?" "Sophie," Evan said gently, "that's personal." "It's okay," Lena said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were somewhere else entirely. "I don't know. Maybe someday." Sophie accepted this with a solemn nod. "Daddy says someday he might want more kids, but only if he meets someone as special as Mommy was. Mommy died when I was born, but I don't remember because I was too little." The casual way children spoke about tragedy. Evan had long since stopped trying to protect Sophie from the truth. She'd absorbed it the way children absorb everything, making it part of her understanding of the world without the weight adults carried. "I'm sorry," Lena said softly. "It's okay. Daddy says she loved me very much, even though she never got to meet me. He shows me pictures." Sophie tilted her head. "Do you have a mommy?" "Sophie, enough questions," Evan said. He slid a pancake onto her plate, a reasonable approximation of a butterfly. "Eat your breakfast." "But I want to know, sis." "Let people have their privacy, bug." Sophie made a face but picked up her fork. Lena stared at the pancake Evan placed in front of her like she'd forgotten what food was supposed to mean. How to accept it. What to do with kindness that asked for nothing in return. They ate in a silence broken only by Sophie's running commentary about the butterfly's wings being uneven and whether Mr. Hopsworth would like pancakes if rabbits could eat them. Lena took small, mechanical bites. Evan watched her from the corner of his eye, trying to solve the impossible equation of what to do with someone who clearly needed help but wouldn't say how. When Sophie finished, she asked to be excused to feed Mr. Hopsworth his pretend breakfast. Evan granted permission, and she scampered off, leaving the two adults alone again. Lena set down her fork. "Thank you for breakfast. And for last night. And for not—" She stopped. Started again. "For not making this harder than it already is." "Where do you need to go?" Evan asked. "I don't know yet." "Do you have family? Friends?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. Not here." Here meaning Pine Haven, or here meaning anywhere close enough to matter. Evan absorbed this. "What about work? A job you need to get back to?" A bitter sound escaped her throat. Not quite a laugh. "No." "Money?" Some. Not much. He nodded slowly, assembling the picture piece by piece. A woman with no connections, no work, limited resources, and bruises that told a story she wouldn't speak. Running from something or someone, trying to disappear. The bakery across from the hardware store on Main Street, he said. They had a help wanted sign up last week. Owner's name is Rita. She's tough but fair. Doesn't ask questions people don't want to answer. Lena looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Why are you helping me? Because you need it. That's not a reason. People need things all the time. That doesn't mean strangers take them home and feed them pancakes and... Her voice broke again. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I just don't understand what you want from me. Nothing, Evan said simply. I want nothing from you. Everyone wants something. Not everyone. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. You're either the kindest person I've ever met or the most dangerous. I can't tell which. Give it time, Evan said. You'll figure it out. Sophie's voice drifted from the living room. She was singing to Mr. Hopsworth, making up words to a melody Evan didn't recognize. Lena turned toward the sound, her expression unguarded for just a moment. Longing, loss, the particular ache of someone looking at a life they'd once imagined but never got to live. I can drive you to the bakery, Evan offered. Introduce you to Rita. If you want the job, she'll probably hire you on the spot. If you don't, at least you'll have tried. Either way, you'll have options. And then? Then whatever comes next. Lena studied him for a long moment, measuring, deciding. Why aren't you afraid of me? Should I be? I could be lying about all of it. Are you? No. Then we're still starting from there. The same words he'd used earlier. A foundation they could build on or walk away from. Lena's choice. Lena's pace. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Evan tensed, ready for her to bolt. But she just carried her plate to the sink, rinsed it carefully, set it in the dish rack with the quiet precision of someone who'd been taught that order mattered, that details were the difference between acceptable and punishable. I'll take the ride, she said without turning around. To the bakery, if the offer's still open. It is. And after that, I'm on my own. If that's what you want. She finally looked at him. What I want doesn't matter. I just need to keep moving. Evan recognized that too. The survival instinct that said safety meant staying invisible, staying ahead of whatever was chasing you. He'd felt it himself in those early days. The urge to pack up Sophie and disappear somewhere no one knew them, somewhere grief couldn't follow. But he'd learned the hard way that running just meant carrying your pain to new zip codes, that healing required the opposite of movement. It required staying still long enough for your wounds to close. The bakery opens at 9, he said. That gives us a couple hours. Sophie will want you to meet Mr. Hopsworth properly, and I should probably show you where the first aid kit is. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to the bruise on her jaw. I'm fine. You're a lot of things, Evan said quietly. Fine isn't one of them. For a moment he thought she might argue, but exhaustion won out. She nodded once, a tiny surrender that felt like trust, even though he knew it was probably just the absence of options. They spent the next hour in the strange domestic intimacy of strangers pretending normalcy. Sophie insisted on showing Lena every corner of the cabin, the workshop where Evan built furniture, the garden plot where they grew tomatoes and herbs, the creek where they sometimes saw deer drinking at dawn. Lena followed patiently, responding to Sophie's endless questions with careful, minimal answers. Evan worked in the shop, giving them space while staying close enough to intervene if needed. He ran his hands over the half-finished rocking chair he'd been building for Mrs. Patterson, the rhythm of sanding wood helping him think. A woman named Lena. Bruises. No connections. Running. Every instinct he had screamed that there was more to the story. A husband, maybe, or a boyfriend. Someone who'd taught her that love came with conditions and consequences. Someone she was terrified would find her. But pushing for answers would only drive her away. Evan knew that much. Trust was built in the spaces between questions, in the choice not to demand explanations. At 8:45, he found them in the living room. Sophie was drawing pictures for Mr. Hopsworth while Lena sat on the floor beside her, watching with an expression Evan couldn't quite read. Ready? He asked. Lena stood quickly, smoothing down the borrowed clothes. Yes. Can she come back? Sophie asked. After work? The question hung in the air. Evan kept his expression neutral, giving Lena the space to answer. I don't know, sweetheart, she said softly, but thank you for sharing your morning with me. You're welcome. Daddy says sharing is important even when it's hard. Something flickered across Lena's face. Your daddy is very wise. They drove into town in Evan's truck. Sophie buckled in the back seat, humming to herself. Lena pressed against the passenger door like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. Main Street was just waking up, the diner's neon sign buzzing to life. Old Mr. Chen sweeping the sidewalk in front of his grocery, the morning regulars claiming their spots at the coffee shop. Evan parked in front of the bakery. Through the window, he could see Rita moving behind the counter, arranging fresh pastries in the display case. She's intimidating at first, he said, but she's good people. She'll treat you fair. Lena nodded, her hand on the door handle. Thank you for everything. I know I already said it, but you don't have to keep thanking me. Yes, I do. Her voice was fierce suddenly, urgent. Because I need to remember that people like you exist, that not everyone... She stopped, breathed. Just thank you. She opened the door and slid out before Evan could respond. He watched her walk into the bakery, shoulders square, head up, a posture that probably cost her everything she had left. Is she going to be okay? Sophie asked from the back seat. Evan met his daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. I don't know, Bug. I hope so. Me too. I liked her. She seemed sad but nice. Yeah, Evan said quietly. She did. They drove home through the quiet streets. Evan told himself he'd done what he could, offered what help he was able to give. It was up to Lena now. What she did with this day, this chance, this small opening in a world that had probably closed around her like a fist. But as he pulled into his driveway and saw his cabin in the morning light, something felt different, changed. Like someone had moved through his life and rearranged the furniture of his assumptions about safety and risk and the distance you were supposed to keep from other people's pain. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Evan sat on the porch with a beer he didn't drink. The forest was alive with night sounds, crickets and rustling leaves, and the distant call of an owl. He thought about Lena somewhere in this town, trying to build a life from nothing. Wondered if she'd gotten the job, if she had a place to sleep, if she was okay or just surviving. He told himself it wasn't his problem, that he'd done his part, that some people couldn't be saved, only offered a moment's respite from whatever was chasing them. But he also remembered the look in her eyes when Sophie had asked if she'd come back. The longing, the fear, the impossible mathematics of wanting something you'd been taught you didn't deserve. Evan understood that. He lived with it every day, the guilt of surviving when Charlotte didn't, the weight of trying to be enough for Sophie when he felt like half a parent on his best days. Maybe that's why he'd opened his door to a stranger, because he recognized the specific loneliness of carrying too much alone, because kindness was the only thing he had control over in a world that took and took and took without asking permission. He went to bed late, falling into restless sleep, and woke at dawn to find his blue work shirt folded neatly on the porch. Beside it, written on the back of a bakery receipt in careful script, "Thank you for not asking who hurt me." Evan picked up the shirt, pressed it to his face. It smelled like the lavender soap from his bathroom, and something else. Vanilla, maybe, or fear. He read the note 3 times, each word landing like a stone in still water. She was gone. Not just from his cabin, but from reach. The note was a closing, not an opening, a way of saying goodbye to the single act of mercy she'd received without having to face the person who'd offered it. Evan should have felt relief. His life could return to normal. The risk he'd taken had resolved itself without consequence. Instead, he felt the hollow ache of unfinished business, of a story cut short before the ending. He kept the note, folded it carefully, and put it in his wallet behind Sophie's school picture. A reminder that sometimes kindness meant letting go, that helping people didn't always come with the satisfaction of knowing how the story ended. But 3 weeks later, walking past the bakery on his way to the hardware store, Evan saw her. Lena stood behind the counter, hair tied back, wearing a white apron dusted with flour. She was smiling at a customer, not a big smile, but real, present. The bruises had faded. She looked thinner, tired, but alive in a way she hadn't been that morning in his living room. Their eyes met through the window. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Lena lifted her hand in a small wave, uncertain, hopeful, a question without words. Evan walked into the bakery. The bell above the door chimed. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon wrapped around him. Lena stood frozen behind the counter, a tray of croissants clutched in her hands like a shield. "Hi," she said. I got the job." "I can see that." She set down the tray. Her hands were shaking. "I left the note because I didn't know how to say goodbye." "You didn't have to say anything." "I wanted to. She swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again, after I just disappeared." Evan leaned against the counter. "Did you think I'd be angry?" "I thought you'd think I was ungrateful, or using you." "I thought you were surviving, same as everyone else." Lena's eyes filled. She blinked rapidly, fighting for control. "Rita's been good to me. She doesn't ask questions. She lets me work, and that's enough." "That's good. I have a room above the bakery. It's small, but it's mine." "That's even better." She studied him carefully. "Why did you come in?" "I needed bread," Evan lied, a real smile this time, small but genuine. "We have excellent bread." "Then I'm in the right place." They stood there in the quiet bakery, morning light streaming through the windows, the world turning around them, while something fragile and impossible took root between two people who'd learned the hard way that trust was earned in small moments of not running away. Lena sold him a loaf of sourdough. Their fingers brushed during the exchange. She didn't flinch. Evan left with bread he didn't need and hope he hadn't expected. And in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, two broken people began the slow, careful work of learning that sometimes survival meant staying still long enough to heal. The bread sat untouched on Evan's counter for 2 days before Sophie noticed. "Daddy, the bread's getting hard," she said, poking the loaf with one finger during breakfast. "We should make French toast before it goes bad." Evan looked up from his coffee. The sourdough sat exactly where he'd placed it Saturday morning, still in its paper bag with the bakery's stamp, a simple wheat stalk and the words Rita's in curved script. He'd bought it as an excuse to walk through that door, to see if Lena was real or if he'd imagined the whole impossible night. Now it served as proof that she existed, that she was trying, that 3 weeks could be long enough to start over. "French toast sounds good," he said. Sophie climbed onto the counter to reach the eggs while Evan sliced the bread. The knife moved through the dense crumb, releasing the sharp tang of fermentation. Rita's bread was the real thing. No shortcuts, no additives, just flour and water and time. The kind of baking that required patience and trust that the process would work. He wondered if Lena knew how to make bread, if Rita was teaching her, or if she just worked the counter and register. If standing in that warm kitchen kneading dough might be the kind of therapy that didn't require words. "Can we go to the bakery again?" Sophie asked, cracking eggs into a bowl with the intense concentration she brought to any task involving potential mess. "I want to see if Lena is still there." "She is. I saw her on Saturday." Sophie's head whipped around so fast her curls flew. "You did? Why didn't you take me?" "I just stopped in quick, got the bread." "Did you talk to her?" "A little." "What did she say?" Evan dipped bread in the egg mixture, laid it carefully in the hot butter. "She said she got the job, that Rita's been good to her." Sophie processed this with her usual seriousness. "Is she still sad?" "I think so, but maybe a little less. We should visit her, so she knows we didn't forget about her." The simple logic of a 6-year-old. You help someone, you don't forget them. You check on them. You make sure they're okay. Adults complicated things with boundaries and assumptions and fear of being intrusive. Children just led with their hearts. "We'll see," Evan said. "That's what you say when you mean maybe but don't want to promise." He smiled despite himself. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just notice it more now that I can use big words." They ate French toast while rain started pattering against the windows. March in Pine Haven meant unpredictable weather, sun one moment, downpour the next, the mountains holding on to winter while the valley reached for spring. Evan had a custom order to finish, a dining table for the Hendersons' 30th anniversary. The wood was already in his shop, maple planks he'd been seasoning for months, waiting for the right project. He worked while Sophie played in her room, the familiar rhythm of measuring and cutting and sanding pulling him into that meditative space where his hands knew what to do without his mind interfering. The wood grain told him where to cut, how the pieces would fit together, what the final form would be before he'd assembled a single joint. But his mind kept drifting back to Lena. The way she'd looked through the bakery window, present but cautious, like someone testing whether solid ground would hold her weight. The note she'd left had said everything and nothing. Thank you for not asking who hurt me. An acknowledgement of pain without naming it. Gratitude for the space he'd given her to just be, without demands or explanations. Evan had learned about that kind of hurt. Not firsthand. His marriage had been good. Charlotte had loved him completely. Their loss was tragedy, not trauma. But he'd seen it. His sister Rachel had escaped a relationship that left scars you couldn't see, the kind that made her flinch at sudden movements years after she was free. He knew enough to recognize the signs, the hypervigilance, the self-blame, the bone-deep certainty that safety was temporary and kindness always came with a bill. The rain intensified, drumming on the metal roof of his shop. Evan glanced out the window and saw Sophie racing across the yard toward the workshop, her yellow raincoat bright against the gray afternoon. She burst through the door in a spray of water and excitement. "Daddy, there's a cat under the porch, a really skinny one, and it's meowing a lot." Evan set down his plane. "Show me." They found the cat pressed against the foundation, a scraggly orange tabby with matted fur and ribs you could count. It hissed when they approached, but didn't run. Probably too weak, Evan realized, or too desperate to give up potential shelter. "It's scared," Sophie whispered. Sophie. Like Lena was. The comparison landed harder than it should have. Evan crouched down, keeping his distance. "We'll put out some food and water. Let it decide if it wants help." "What if it doesn't?" "Then we'll keep putting out food until it does." They set up a feeding station at the edge of the porch, tuna from a can and a bowl of water. The cat watched from the shadows, but didn't approach. Sophie wanted to stay and wait, but Evan coaxed her inside with the promise of hot chocolate and a movie. "Animals have to choose to be helped," he explained, measuring cocoa into mugs. "You can't force them. You just make the help available and trust they'll take it when they're ready." "Is that what you did with Lena?" Evan paused mid-pour. His daughter saw too much, understood connections adults spent years in therapy learning to make. "Yeah, Bug, something like that." "Did it work?" "I don't know yet, but she's still here. That's something." Sophie nodded solemnly. "The cat will come eat eventually. Things always do when they're hungry enough." She was right. By evening, the tuna was gone and the bowl licked clean. The next morning, Evan put out more. By the third day, the cat was waiting on the porch when he opened the door. "She's a girl," Sophie announced after careful observation. "And she should be named Marmalade because of her color." "We're not keeping her," Evan warned. "I know, we're just helping her until she's ready to go." But the cat didn't go. She ate. She slept in the shelter Evan built from an old crate and some blankets. She tolerated Sophie's gentle attempts at petting. A week later, she was following them around the yard, still wary but no longer running. Evan took her to the vet on a Saturday morning. Dr. Morrison examined her with practiced efficiency, checking teeth, feeling for microchips, listening to her heart. "She's been on her own a while," the vet said. "Probably a year, maybe more. No chip, no collar, no obvious signs of previous ownership. She's lucky you found her. Another month and she might not have made it." "Can we keep her?" Sophie asked, even though Evan had explicitly said they weren't keeping her. Dr. Morrison smiled. "That's between you and your dad. But she's healthy enough now. Just needs regular meals and somewhere safe to sleep." They left with antibiotics, deworming medication, and a cat. Sophie was ecstatic. Evan was resigned. Apparently his life now included rescuing creatures who showed up uninvited and refused to leave. "We should tell Lena," Sophie said as they drove home. "She'd be happy about Marmalade." "I don't think—" "Please?" "We could go to the bakery. I could show her pictures." Evan glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were bright with the particular joy of childhood logic that saw no obstacle to connection. Why wouldn't you share good news with someone you cared about? Why wouldn't you want them to be part of your happiness? Okay, he said, we'll stop by. The bakery was busy when they arrived, the Saturday morning crowd thick around the counter. Lena moved behind the register with quiet efficiency, taking orders and making change while Rita pulled fresh pastries from the oven. She didn't see them at first, focused on the transaction in front of her. Sophie pressed her face against the display case, cataloging the options with serious consideration. I want the one with the sugar on top, and maybe the chocolate one, or the one with the jam. Pick one, Evan said. That's impossible. They're all good. Then I'll surprise you. When they reached the counter, Lena looked up and something in her expression shifted. Not fear, but something adjacent to it. The wariness of someone who'd learned that people appearing unexpectedly rarely brought good news. Hi, Evan said. Hi. She glanced at Sophie. Hello, Sophie. Hi, Lena. We got a cat. Her name is Marmalade, and she was living under our porch, but now she lives inside, and Daddy says we can keep her even though he said we couldn't, but we are anyway. The words came out in a rush, pure 6-year-old enthusiasm. Lena's face softened, the guardedness giving way to something gentler. That's wonderful, she said. I'm sure she's very lucky. She was really skinny, but now she's getting fat because we feed her all the time. Do you like cats? I do. You should come see her. She's very soft now that her fur isn't all matted. Lena's eyes flicked to Evan. He gave a small shrug. Your call, your comfort zone. Maybe sometime, she said carefully. Rita appeared beside her, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. You folks decide what you want, or are you going to stand there making conversation all day? The older woman's voice was gruff, but her eyes were kind. She knew Evan. Everyone in Pine Haven knew everyone, and she'd clearly formed opinions about the single father who'd brought a bruised stranger to her door weeks ago. 2 coffee and whatever Sophie picks, Evan said. The sugar one and the chocolate one, Sophie declared. Because I couldn't decide, so I'm getting both. Rita snorted. Smart kid. Lena, box up those pastries and take your break. You've been on your feet since 5. I'm fine. That wasn't a request. Rita jerked her head toward the small table by the window. Go sit. Talk to your friends. The morning rush is done. Lena looked like she might protest, but Rita had already turned away. She boxed the pastries with careful precision, poured 2 coffees, and followed Evan and Sophie to the table with the hesitant steps of someone walking into uncertain territory. Sophie immediately launched into a detailed account of Marmalade's rescue, complete with dramatic reenactments of the cat's initial hissing and subsequent transformation into a docile house pet. Lena listened with the kind of attention that made you feel heard, asking questions at the right moments, smiling at Sophie's enthusiasm. She sounds like she was very brave, Lena said, surviving on her own like that. Daddy says sometimes being brave just means not giving up, Sophie said through a mouthful of pastry, even when things are really hard. Lena's gaze shifted to Evan. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the truth nested in his daughter's innocent words. Your daddy is right, she said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the bakery warm and fragrant around them. Through the window, Pine Haven's main street went about its Saturday business. People running errands, stopping to chat, living the small-town choreography Evan had been part of for years, but Lena was just learning. How are you settling in? Evan asked. It's good. Rita's been... She paused, searching for the right word. Patient. She shows me things but doesn't push, lets me work at my own pace. She's good people. She is. Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. The room upstairs is small, but it's mine. I can lock the door. That matters more than I thought it would. The simple statement carried weight. Evan nodded, understanding without pressing for details. Do you know how to make bread? Sophie asked. Because the bread you sold us was really good, and we made French toast, and it was the best French toast ever. A real smile this time. Rita's teaching me. I'm not very good yet, but I'm learning. Daddy says learning is just being bad at something until you're not bad anymore. Your daddy says a lot of smart things. Sophie beamed with the pride of a child whose parent has been complimented. He does. He's the smartest person I know, except maybe Mrs. Chen at the grocery store, because she knows where everything is, even the weird stuff. Lena laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was rusty, unpracticed, but genuine. Evan felt something shift in his chest, a tightness he hadn't realized was there, releasing slightly. Rita called from behind the counter. "Lena, need you back here." Lena stood quickly, the walls coming back up. "I should go. Thank you for stopping by, and for telling me about Marmalade." "You could come see her," Sophie said. "For real, not just maybe. Tomorrow's Sunday, and we don't have plans, and you could meet her, and we could show you the workshop and the creek, and—" "Sophie," Evan said gently, "let Lena decide." But Sophie was undeterred. "Please? It would be fun, and Marmalade would like you. She likes everyone now that she's not scared anymore." Lena looked trapped. Evan could see the war playing out across her face, the desire for connection battling the instinct to keep distance, to not get attached, to not give anyone the power to hurt her again. "You don't have to," Evan said, "but if you want to, you're welcome. No pressure either way." She studied him for a long moment, measuring sincerity, testing for hidden expectations. "What time?" she asked finally. Sophie bounced in her seat. 2:00. We can have cookies and show you everything." 2:00, Lena repeated. "Okay, I'll be there." She disappeared behind the counter before either of them could respond. Sophie was already planning the afternoon, listing all the things they needed to show Lena. Evan drank his coffee and watched Lena through the window into the kitchen, seeing the way she moved, efficient, controlled, taking up as little space as possible, even in a room where she had every right to belong. They drove home through streets dappled with morning sun. Sophie chattered about what cookies to make and whether Marmalade would perform her new trick of standing on her hind legs for treats. Evan made appropriate responses while his mind worked through the implications of what he'd just agreed to. A woman he barely knew, coming to his home. Again. This time without the excuse of emergency or desperate need. This time as something that looked dangerously close to friendship. He should be more careful. Should maintain boundaries. Should protect the quiet life he'd built for himself and Sophie from complications that could unravel everything. But he thought about the note. About the way Lena had folded his shirt with the care of someone who understood that small gestures mattered. About the fact that she'd stayed in Pine Haven when she could have run. That she'd shown up at the bakery every day. That she'd said yes to Sophie's invitation even though it clearly terrified her. Courage came in different forms. Sometimes it looked like charging into battle. Sometimes it looked like a bruised woman accepting a job and showing up to work. Sometimes it looked like saying yes when every survival instinct screamed to say no. By Sunday afternoon, the cabin was cleaner than it had been in months. Sophie had insisted they prepare properly, fresh flowers from the early blooms in the garden, the good cookies from the tin Evan saved for special occasions, marmalade brushed until her fur shone. "We want her to feel welcome," Sophie explained with the gravity of a diplomat arranging a summit. "She's just visiting, Bug. Not moving in." "I know, but first impressions matter. You told me that." Evan couldn't argue with his own wisdom being quoted back to him. At 1:55, he found himself checking the driveway every 30 seconds, a nervous energy he hadn't felt since high school making his hands restless. At 2:03, a small sedan pulled up. Lena sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before emerging, clutching a paper bag. Sophie was out the door before Evan could stop her, racing across the yard in her Sunday dress. "You came! I thought maybe you'd forget, but you came!" Lena's smile was fragile but present. "I said I would." "I brought bread," she said as Evan approached. "I made it myself. Rita supervised, but I did all the kneading and shaping. It's probably not as good as hers, but it's perfect," Evan said. "Thank you." They stood awkwardly in the driveway, the weight of what this moment meant pressing down on the casual pretense of a simple visit. Then Marmalade appeared from under the porch, stretching in the afternoon sun, and Sophie was pulling Lena toward the cat, narrating every detail of their rescue and rehabilitation. The afternoon unfolded in careful increments. Lena met Marmalade, who surprised everyone by immediately rubbing against her legs and purring. They walked to the creek, Sophie leading the way and pointing out landmarks. The flat rock where turtles sunned themselves. The bend where the water pooled deep enough for wading in summer. The old oak with branches perfect for climbing. Lena listened to everything with that same intense attention, asked questions, laughed at Sophie's jokes, looked genuinely happy in moments when she forgot to guard herself. In the workshop, Evan showed her the Henderson table, explaining his process while Sophie added commentary about how the wood smelled good and made pretty curls when Daddy used the plane. Lena ran her fingers over the smooth maple, traced the grain patterns, asked intelligent questions about joinery and finish. "You made all this?" she asked, gesturing to the pieces in various stages of completion. "It's what I do. It's beautiful. The way you can see the intention in every cut, every joint." She paused. "It must be satisfying, making things that last." "It is. Most of the time." "What about the times it isn't?" Evan considered this. "When the wood fights you, when your vision doesn't match what's actually possible, when you have to accept that sometimes good enough is all you get." Lena nodded slowly. "I'm learning that, about the good enough part." They walked back to the cabin as the sun started its descent toward the mountains. Sophie insisted they have cookies and milk, a formal tea party that involved Marmalade wearing a ribbon and Sophie explaining the rules of polite conversation. "You have to wait until someone finishes talking before you talk," she explained to Lena. "And you have to say please and thank you, and you can't mention anything gross at the table." "What counts as gross?" Lena asked. Sophie thought carefully. "Boogers, poop, dead things, Daddy's socks." "Hey," Evan protested, "my socks aren't that bad." "Yes, they are. They smell like a feet factory." Lena laughed again, more easily this time. They ate cookies Rita had taught her to make, buttery shortbread with lavender that melted on your tongue. Sophie proclaimed them the best cookies she'd ever had, which Lena clearly didn't believe but accepted with grace. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Evan watched Lena slowly unwind. Not completely. There was still a tightness in her shoulders, a readiness in the way she positioned herself near exits. But she was here, present, trying. When the light turned golden and long shadows stretched across the yard, Lena stood reluctantly. "I should go. Rita will wonder where I am." "Does she know you're here?" Evan asked. "I told her I was visiting a friend." The word seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "She said to take my time." Sophie hugged Lena fiercely at the door. "Will you come back, please? We could show you the garden when things start growing, and maybe you could help us plant tomatoes and—" "Sophie, breathe," Evan said, but Lena was crouching down to Sophie's level. "I'd like that. If your dad says it's okay." "It's okay," Sophie said immediately, looking at Evan for confirmation. He nodded. "Door's always open." Lena stood, met his eyes. "Thank you. For today. For—" she gestured helplessly. "For making this feel normal. It is normal. People visit, have cookies, meet cats. That's what friends do." Friends. There was that word again, testing the boundaries of what this was becoming. Lena's expression flickered with something Evan couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe. Or fear of hoping. "I've forgotten what normal looks like. This is helping me remember." She left before he could respond, walking to her car with measured steps. Evan and Sophie watched from the porch as she drove away, taillights disappearing into the dusk. "I really like her," Sophie said quietly. "Me too, Bug." "Is she going to be okay?" The question every parent dreaded, the one that demanded honesty but offered no guarantees. Evan pulled Sophie close. "I don't know. But she's trying. That's what matters." Inside, Marmalade was curled up on the couch where Lena had been sitting. Sophie stroked the cat's fur absently. "Daddy, why was Lena so scared when she came here the first time?" Evan chose his words carefully. "Sometimes people go through hard things, things that make them afraid of being hurt again." "Did someone hurt her?" "I think so." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then, "But she's not scared of us, right?" "Not anymore. Or at least less scared." "Good. Because we would never hurt her. We're the good guys. The simple moral universe of childhood. Evan wished it stayed that simple. Wished he could promise his daughter that being good meant you were safe, that kindness was always rewarded, that people who deserved help always got it. But he'd learned the hard way that the world didn't work that way. That good people died in childbirth, that bad things happened to those who'd done nothing to deserve them, that survival sometimes meant running and hiding and learning to flinch before the blow landed. All he could do was model something different. Show Sophie that there were still people who opened doors instead of closing them, who offered help without demanding payment, who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stay. That week fell into a rhythm. Evan worked on the Henderson table. Sophie went to school and came home full of stories about playground dynamics and art projects. Marmalade settled into domestic life with the contentment of an animal who'd found their forever home. And on Wednesday, Lena walked into the hardware store where Evan was picking up sandpaper. "Hi," she said, looking as surprised as he felt. "Hi, running errands?" "Rita sent me for baking soda. We're out and she's in the middle of a recipe." She held up the box like evidence. "What are you doing?" "Same. Errands, sandpaper." He held up his package. They stood in the middle of the aisle, shoppers moving around them, both acutely aware that this was the first time they'd run into each other without planning it. "How's Marmalade?" Lena asked. "Spoiled. Sophie's convinced she needs a friend, so now we're apparently getting a second cat." "Are you?" "Probably. My ability to say no to my daughter is severely compromised." Lena smiled. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her. She makes me better than I'd be on my own." Something shifted in Lena's expression. "I know what you mean." They talked for another few minutes, surface conversation about the weather and work, and nothing important. But underneath ran a current of something else: recognition, connection. The tentative acknowledgement that they were becoming part of each other's lives in ways that went beyond that first desperate night. When they parted, Lena touched his arm briefly. "Thank you for Sunday. I haven't felt that relaxed in..." She stopped. "In a very long time." "You're welcome here anytime," Evan said. "I mean that." "I know you do. That's what makes it so hard to believe." She left before he could ask what she meant. Evan bought his sandpaper and drove home, thinking about the weight of trust, how it had to be earned in small moments, how you couldn't force it or rush it, how some people had learned the hard way that trust was dangerous, and unlearning that took time. But time was something he could give. Patience, consistency, the steady proof that not everyone would hurt you, that some doors stayed open even when you walked away. At dinner, Sophie asked if Lena could come to her school play next month. "We're doing a version of The Wizard of Oz and I'm a munchkin, and it would be nice if she could see it." "We'll ask her," Evan said, "but she might have to work." Rita would let her go. Rita likes her. "How do you know that?" "Because Mrs. Patterson told Mrs. Chen that Rita said Lena was the best hire she'd made in 10 years. And Mrs. Chen told Daddy Rodriguez at school pickup. And Daddy Rodriguez told you last week, but you weren't listening because you were watching the birds." Evan had learned to never underestimate small-town information networks. "Okay, we'll ask." That Saturday, Lena came for dinner. It wasn't planned as anything more than a casual meal, but Sophie treated it like a state dinner. She set the table with the cloth napkins they only used for holidays, arranged wildflowers in a mason jar centerpiece, and insisted Evan make his famous lasagna instead of the chicken he'd planned. "Lena needs to know we can cook fancy," Sophie explained, smoothing the tablecloth for the third time. "Lasagna isn't fancy. It's pasta and cheese." "It's fancy pasta and cheese. There's layers. Layers make things fancy." Evan didn't argue. He made the lasagna, let Sophie fuss over details that wouldn't matter to anyone but her, and tried to ignore the nervous energy that had settled in his stomach. It was just dinner. Just a friend coming over. Nothing complicated about that. Except it felt complicated. Because every time he saw Lena, he noticed more. The way she listened like every word mattered. The careful way she moved through spaces, always aware of exits and proximity. The moments when her guard dropped and he glimpsed the person she might have been before someone taught her to be afraid. Lena arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and an apology. "I don't know if you drink, but Rita said you can't show up to dinner empty-handed, and I didn't know what else to bring." Wine's perfect, Evan said, taking the bottle. A decent Chianti, nothing expensive, but thoughtful. Come in. Sophie's been staging the dining room like we're hosting the president. I can hear you, Sophie called from the kitchen. And it's not staging, it's preparing. There's a difference. Lena smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. She'd dressed carefully, nothing fancy, just clean jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her eyes look lighter. Her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. Small changes that felt significant. Dinner was easier than Evan expected. Sophie carried most of the conversation, talking about school and Marmalade's latest antics and the elaborate plans she had for the garden this year. Lena asked questions, laughed at the right moments, and slowly relaxed into the warmth of the small cabin. "This is really good," she said after the first bite of lasagna. "Did you make the sauce from scratch?" "He makes everything from scratch," Sophie said proudly. "Except the noodles. Those come from a box because Daddy says making pasta is where he draws the line." "A man has to have boundaries," Evan said. "Rita makes pasta sometimes," Lena offered. "She showed me how to roll it through the machine. It's harder than it looks." "Everything's harder than it looks," Sophie said with the wisdom of someone who'd tried and failed at many things. "That's why practice is important." They ate and talked as the evening light faded to dusk. Evan opened the wine, poured 2 glasses, and felt something unfamiliar settle over the table. Domesticity. The comfortable rhythm of shared meals and easy conversation. The feeling of family, even if the word felt too heavy to say out loud. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Lena her room and the elaborate city she'd built from blocks and cardboard boxes. Evan cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift down the hallway. Sophie's high and excited, Lena's lower and softer, but genuinely engaged. He was drying the last plate when Lena appeared in the kitchen doorway. "She's showing me every stuffed animal she owns. I think we'll be a while. She doesn't get a lot of visitors. She's making the most of it." "I don't mind." Lena picked up a dish towel, started drying alongside him without asking. "It's nice. Being around someone who still sees the world as full of possibilities instead of threats. That's childhood. Everything's an adventure until life teaches you otherwise. You've managed to protect that for her. That's not easy for a single parent." Evan set down the plate he'd been washing. "How did you know I'm—" "Sophie mentioned her mom died, and there's no evidence of another adult living here. No women's clothes, no second toothbrush, no—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "Sorry. I'm observant. Habit. Survival skill," Evan said quietly. "Yeah." They worked in silence for a moment, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Outside, the first stars were appearing through the kitchen window. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said finally. "Sure. Why did you help me? That night. You didn't know me. I could have been anyone." Evan dried his hands slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I lost my wife 6 years ago. Childbirth complications. The doctors did everything they could, but sometimes everything isn't enough." He paused. "Those first months after, I was barely functioning, just going through the motions for Sophie because she needed someone. And people helped. Brought meals, watched Sophie when I couldn't, didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. They just showed up." "So you were paying it forward." "Maybe. Or maybe I just recognized what drowning looks like, and I couldn't walk past someone who was going under." Lena's hand stilled on the dish she was drying. "I wasn't drowning. I was already underwater. You pulled me up. You pulled yourself up. I just gave you a place to catch your breath." She turned to face him fully, her back against the counter. "I was married, for 4 years, to someone who made me believe that love meant controlling everything I did, everyone I talked to, every thought I had, who convinced me I was lucky he put up with me, that no one else would." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "I believed him. For so long I believed him." Evan didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. "The night you found me, I'd finally left. Took nothing but my purse and the clothes I was wearing. Walked out while he was asleep and just started driving. Didn't know where I was going, just knew I couldn't go back." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I ended up at that pier because I ran out of gas. Literally couldn't run any further." "Did he try to find you?" Probably, I don't know. I threw away my phone, changed my name at the bakery. Lena's my middle name. I know it's not a real fresh start, but it's something. It's everything, Evan said. You chose yourself. That's the hardest choice there is. Lena's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. Some days I still don't believe I deserve to be here, to be safe, to have people who are kind without wanting something in return. You deserve all of it. How can you know that? You barely know me. I know you're kind to my daughter. I know you show up to work every day. I know you said thank you for not asking who hurt you, which means you understand the value of giving people space to heal. He paused. I know you brought wine to dinner and you're standing in my kitchen being honest, even though it's clearly terrifying you. That's enough. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like this. You're not falling apart. You're just being human. I forgot how to do that. Be human without permission, without checking first if it's allowed. Before Evan could respond, Sophie's voice called from down the hall. Lena, you have to see Marmalade do her trick. She's being very good right now. Lena laughed through her tears, a wet, broken sound that somehow held hope. She squeezed Evan's hand once, quick and certain, then disappeared down the hallway. Evan stayed in the kitchen, staring at his hand where she'd touched it. The brief contact felt like a promise, or maybe just proof that trust could be built in increments, one honest conversation at a time. The rest of the evening passed in the comfortable chaos of Sophie's enthusiasm. Marmalade performed her standing trick repeatedly for treats. They played a board game Sophie had invented that had rules only she understood. Lena relaxed into it all, laughing more freely than Evan had heard before. When she left at 9, Sophie hugged her at the door. You should come every Saturday. We could make it a tradition. We'll see, Lena said, using Evan's own deflection. That means maybe, Sophie informed her, but I'm going to keep asking until maybe becomes yes. She's persistent, Lena said to Evan. Wonder where she gets it. Lena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Thank you for tonight, for listening, for not making me feel broken. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. I'm starting to believe that. After she left, Evan found himself standing on the porch, long after her taillights disappeared. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and creek water. Inside, Sophie was getting ready for bed, singing to herself about munchkins and yellow brick roads. His life was good, simple but complete. He had his daughter, his work, his small community. He'd learned to be content with that after Charlotte died, to stop reaching for things that felt too fragile to hold. But Lena made him wonder if maybe he'd been protecting himself as much as Sophie. If maybe keeping everyone at arm's length meant missing the possibility of something real. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Lena came for dinner most Saturdays. Sometimes she brought bread or pastries from the bakery. Sometimes she just brought herself and stayed late, talking with Evan on the porch after Sophie went to bed. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd been, dreams they'd had before life got complicated. Slowly, carefully, they built something neither could quite name. Not quite friendship, though that was part of it. Not quite romance, though the potential hung between them like a question neither was ready to ask. One evening in early April, Lena showed up with a black eye. Sophie saw it first, gasping before Evan could stop her. What happened to your face? Lena's hand flew to the bruise, instinctive. I'm fine. Just clumsy. Walked into a cabinet door at the bakery. But her eyes wouldn't meet Evan's, and her hands were shaking. Sophie, bless her, accepted the explanation with childhood logic. You should be more careful. Daddy says I need to watch where I'm going or I'll walk into everything. Daddy's right, Lena said, her voice too bright. Dinner was strained. Lena pushed food around her plate, offered one-word answers to Sophie's questions, flinched at sudden movements. Every survival instinct Evan had learned to read screamed that something was wrong. After Sophie went to bed, he found Lena on the porch, staring into the dark woods. Talk to me, he said quietly. There's nothing to talk about. I told you what happened. Lena. She turned, and in the porch light he could see the bruise properly, fresh, dark purple, the kind that came from impact with something harder than a cabinet door. Did he find you? Evan asked. The question hung between them. Lena's face crumpled. I don't know, maybe. There was a man at the bakery this afternoon. He didn't say anything, just ordered coffee and sat in the corner watching me. Dark hair, expensive suit, wrong for Pinehaven. He left after an hour, but... She wrapped her arms around herself. I got paranoid, kept looking over my shoulder. When I was closing up, I turned too fast and... She gestured to her face. Really did walk into the door, but I was running scared and that's why I wasn't paying attention. So it really was an accident. The bruise is, the fear isn't. She sank into the porch chair. I thought I was safe here, that I'd gotten far enough away. But what if I didn't? What if he's looking? What if... Hey. Evan crouched in front of her chair. Look at me. What if isn't real? Right now, in this moment, you're safe. You're here. Nothing has happened except you got scared and hurt yourself. That's all we know for sure. But what if that man was just a guy passing through? Pinehaven gets tourists, people on their way to somewhere else. One stranger in a coffee shop doesn't mean you've been found. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. But I know that living in constant fear of what might happen is another kind of prison. You left to be free. Don't let the what-ifs take that away. Lena's breath came in short, sharp gasps. Evan recognized the signs of a panic attack building. He'd seen them before with his sister, knew the spiral once it started. Breathe with me, he said calmly. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Can you do that? She nodded, eyes locked on his. They breathed together, counting silently until her breathing slowed, the panic receding like a tide. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't apologize for being scared. It's a reasonable response to trauma. I hate that I'm like this, that I can't just move on. Moving on isn't a straight line. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you take 3 steps back for every one forward. But you're still moving. That counts. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. A gesture of exhaustion more than affection, but Evan felt the trust in it, the willingness to be vulnerable, even when vulnerability felt dangerous. They stayed like that until her breathing evened out completely, until the tension left her shoulders and she could sit up without shaking. Stay here tonight, Evan said. The spare room. You shouldn't be alone right now. I can't. Yes, you can. No arguments. I'll take the couch. You take my bed. And tomorrow we'll figure out if there's anything real to worry about, or if it's just your brain protecting you from phantom threats. Lena looked at him with those dark, haunted eyes. Why do you keep doing this? Letting me crash into your life and mess everything up? You're not messing anything up. You're just here, and that's okay. It shouldn't be. You should have boundaries, protection, some sense of self-preservation. I have plenty of self-preservation. I also have enough space in my life for someone who needs it. He stood, offered his hand. Come on, let's get you settled. She took his hand and let him lead her inside. He gave her the spare room this time, the one with the comfortable bed and the window overlooking the creek, found her a clean shirt to sleep in, showed her where everything was. Thank you, she said from the doorway, for not making me explain more than I could, for just believing me. I'll always believe you, Evan said. That's what friends do. That word again. Friends. Such an inadequate term for what they were becoming. Lena slept fitfully. Evan knew because he didn't sleep at all, listening to her move around the room, get up twice for water, pace when the nightmares got too close. At dawn he made coffee and found her already dressed, sitting on the porch steps watching the sunrise. Morning, he said, handing her a mug. Morning? She looked exhausted, but calmer. I'm sorry about last night. I overreacted. You reacted appropriately to what your nervous system perceived as a threat. There's a difference. You sound like a therapist. I sound like someone who's been to a therapist. After Charlotte died, I saw someone for a year, learned a lot about trauma and grief and how the brain tries to protect us even when the danger's past. Lena absorbed this. Did it help? Eventually, not immediately, but over time. Some things you can't think your way through. You just have to feel them until they get smaller. What if they never get smaller? They will. Different, maybe, never gone completely, but smaller, manageable. He sat beside her on the step. You want to know what helped me most? What? Letting people help, accepting that I couldn't do it alone, admitting that needing support wasn't weakness. He looked at her directly. You don't have to carry this by yourself. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. You're a person who went through something terrible and is trying to heal. That's brave, not burdensome. The sun climbed higher, painting the mountains gold. Somewhere in the trees, a cardinal sang its sharp, clear song. Lena leaned her head against Evan's shoulder, a gesture that was becoming familiar. I need to tell Rita, she said quietly, about my ex, about why I'm here. She deserves to know if there might be trouble. That's a good idea. Rita's tougher than she looks. She'll have your back. Will you come with me when I tell her? If you want me to. I do. They went to the bakery that afternoon. Rita took one look at Lena's face and ushered them into the back office, a cluttered space that smelled like yeast and cinnamon. Talk, Rita said, settling into her chair with the authority of someone who'd seen everything twice. Lena told her story. Not all of it. Evan suspected there were details she'd never share with anyone. But enough. The marriage that became a cage. The control that tightened like a noose. The decision to run. The fear that she'd been found. Rita listened without interrupting, her weathered face showing nothing. When Lena finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment. You got a restraining order? Rita asked. No, I didn't think I had time. I just left. We'll fix that. My nephew's a lawyer in Spokane. Good man. He'll help. Rita stood, poured them all coffee from the ancient pot she kept in the corner. You did the right thing, leaving. Takes guts most people don't have. But now you need to do the smart thing too. Legal protection, documentation, paper trail. What if that makes him angry? What if he comes looking because I filed papers? He's already looking or he's not. Papers don't change that, but they give you options. They put him on notice that you're not alone anymore. Rita looked at Evan. She's not alone, right? Right, Evan said firmly. Good, because I don't tolerate anyone messing with my people. Lena's one of mine now. Anyone wants to start trouble, they go through me first. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You do that? Even knowing I brought this to your door? Kid, I've been running this bakery for 30 years. I've seen things that would curl your hair, helped more than a few women disappear from bad situations. You're not special in needing help. You're just next in line to get it. Rita softened slightly. Besides, you make decent bread and you show up on time. That counts for something. Lena laughed through her tears. Rita handed her a napkin. Now here's what we're going to do, Rita continued. I'm calling my nephew today. He'll handle the legal stuff, pro bono because I'll guilt him into it. You're going to write down everything you remember, dates, incidents, anything that documents the abuse, and you're going to stop sleeping in that room above the bakery alone. I don't have anywhere else. She can stay with us, Evan said before he could second-guess himself. Spare room, until she feels safe again. Rita raised an eyebrow. That appropriate? It's necessary. And yes, it's appropriate. Sophie loves having her around, and I'm not letting her spend nights looking over her shoulder when there's a perfectly good room sitting empty. Lena looked between them. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Evan met her eyes. Let someone help you, please. The please did it. Lena nodded, a tiny surrender that felt like progress. They spent the afternoon making plans. Rita called her nephew, who agreed to take Lena's case immediately. They went to the sheriff's office, where Deputy Morrison took a report and promised to keep an eye out for any suspicious vehicles or strangers asking about Lena. Pine Haven's small, Morrison said. Someone starts poking around, we'll know, and we take care of our own. By evening, Lena had moved her few belongings into Evan's spare room. It wasn't much, some clothes, a few books, the bread-making notes Rita had given her. Everything she owned fit in 2 bags, a testament to how thoroughly she'd erased her old life. Sophie was thrilled to have Lena staying with them. It's like having a big sister. Can she read me bedtime stories? Can we teach her to garden? Can she help me with my Wizard of Oz costume? One thing at a time, Bug, Evan said. Let Lena settle in first. But Lena was smiling, some of the fear from the previous night replaced with tentative hope. I can do all those things. If you want help. I want help, Sophie declared. Daddy's terrible at sewing, and my costume needs serious work. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Evan found Lena unpacking in the spare room. She moved slowly, carefully, placing each item like it might disappear if she wasn't gentle enough. You okay? He asked from the doorway. I think so. It's strange having space that's mine without having to pay rent on it, without strings. No strings, just a room. Take it or leave it. She turned to face him. Why are you doing this, really? I know what you said about paying it forward, about recognizing drowning, but this is more than that. This is opening your home, disrupting your life, taking on risk. Maybe I'm tired of playing it safe, Evan interrupted. Maybe I've spent 6 years building walls to protect Sophie and me from getting hurt again, and maybe those walls were keeping out more than pain. He paused. Maybe you remind me that there are things worth risking for. The air between them shifted. Lena took a step closer, then stopped herself. I can't. I'm not ready for anything more than this, than friendship. I know, I'm not asking for more. But you want more. Evan considered lying, decided against it. Eventually, maybe, if you wanted it too, but there's no timeline, no pressure. You need to heal. I need to figure out what wanting more even means. We've got time. Lena's expression was unreadable. Time. I've never had much of that. It was always urgent, always now, always prove yourself immediately or pay the price. Then learn to have time. That's part of healing too. She crossed the space between them, stood close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. Thank you for giving me that. Time, space, the freedom to figure out who I am without someone telling me who I should be. You're welcome. For a moment, Evan thought she might kiss him. The possibility hung between them, electric and terrifying. But she just squeezed his hand, the same quick gesture from weeks ago, and turned back to her unpacking. Good night, Evan. Good night, Lena. He left her to settle in, his hand still warm where she'd touched it. Downstairs, he poured himself a small glass of the whiskey he saved for nights when sleep felt impossible, sat on the porch and listened to the creek rushing over stones in the dark. His life had gotten complicated. A woman with a dangerous past sleeping under his roof. A situation that could blow up in ways he couldn't predict. Risk layered on risk. But looking up at the spare room window where soft light glowed, Evan found he didn't regret it. Some things were worth the risk. Some people deserved the chance to heal in safety. And maybe, just maybe, he deserved the chance to live again instead of just surviving. The morning after Lena moved in, Evan woke to the smell of coffee and something baking. For a disorienting moment, he thought he'd dreamed the last 6 years, that Charlotte was downstairs making breakfast like she used to on Sunday mornings. Then reality settled back into place. Charlotte was gone, Sophie was still asleep, and Lena was the one moving quietly through his kitchen. He found her pulling muffins from the oven, her hair tied back with one of Sophie's hair ribbons, wearing the same borrowed sweater from weeks ago. She startled when she saw him, nearly dropping the pan. Sorry, she said quickly. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't want to just sit there staring at the ceiling. Rita taught me her blueberry muffin recipe, and I thought maybe Sophie would like them for breakfast. I should have asked first. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. Lena, breathe. Evan crossed to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup. It's fine. Better than fine. The house smells amazing. She set the muffins on the cooling rack with shaking hands. I'm not used to this. Having freedom to just do things without asking permission first. Then get used to it. You live here now. You don't need permission to use the kitchen or make breakfast or exist in this space. He leaned against the counter. How'd you sleep? Not well, but better than I would have alone. She finally met his eyes. Thank you. Again. I know I keep saying it, but then stop saying it. We're past thank you. We're at the part where this is just normal life. A small smile touched her lips. Normal. I'm still figuring out what that means. Sophie thundered down the stairs in her pajamas, marmalade trailing behind her. I smell muffins. Did Daddy make muffins? Daddy never makes muffins. Lena made them, Evan said. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Can I have one? Are they ready? Do they have blueberries because blueberries are my favorite? They have blueberries, Lena confirmed. But they need to cool first or you'll burn your mouth. I can wait. I'm very patient. Sophie climbed into her chair, staring at the muffins with the intensity of a predator watching prey. How long is cooling? Is it like 5 minutes or 5 hours? Somewhere in between, Lena said, amusement warming her voice. They ate breakfast together, Sophie chattering about her costume for the school play, and how Mrs. Patterson said she had the best singing voice of all the Munchkins. Lena listened with the same careful attention she gave everything, asking questions that made Sophie feel heard and important. Evan watched them interact and felt something shift in his chest. This could be his life. This warmth, this ease, this feeling of family that he'd thought died with Charlotte. It terrified him how much he wanted it. After breakfast, Sophie insisted on showing Lena the garden plot where they'd start planting soon. Evan cleaned up the kitchen, giving them space, trying to quiet the voice in his head that whispered warnings about getting too comfortable, too attached, too hopeful. The phone rang while he was elbow deep in soapy water. Rita's voice came through sharp and urgent. Evan, we got a problem. His stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Man came into the bakery this morning, early, before we opened, knocked on the door saying he was looking for his wife. Described Lena down to the scar on her left wrist that I didn't even know she had. Evan's hand tightened on the phone. What did you tell him? Told him I don't know anyone by that description, and he should move along before I called the sheriff. He left, but... Rita paused. He knows she's here, Evan, or suspects strongly enough to come looking. Did you call Morrison? First thing, he's sending a patrol by every few hours, but you need to tell Lena, and you need to be careful. After he hung up, Evan stood at the sink watching Lena and Sophie through the window. They were crouched by the garden, Sophie explaining her elaborate plans for tomato plants and sunflowers. Lena was smiling, genuinely relaxed for maybe the first time since he'd known her. He hated having to shatter that peace. When they came back inside, Sophie ran upstairs to get dressed for the day. Evan caught Lena's arm gently. We need to talk. Her smile disappeared. What happened? He told her about Rita's call, watching the color drain from her face with each word. By the time he finished, she was gripping the counter so hard her knuckles had gone white. He found me. Her voice was flat, empty. I knew he would. I knew I couldn't just disappear. People like him don't let go of what they own. You're not his. You were never his. Try telling him that. She pushed away from the counter, started pacing. I need to leave. Now, before he comes here. Before he involves you and Sophia. No. Evan, you don't understand. He's dangerous. Not just angry or controlling, actually dangerous. If he finds out I'm here, he already knows you're in Pine Haven. Running now won't change that. It'll just put you on the road alone where you're more vulnerable. I can't stay here. I won't put Sophie at risk. Sophie's safe. This house is safe. Morrison knows what's happening. Rita knows. Half the town will know by noon because that's how small towns work. Your ex might have found Pine Haven, but he's walking into a community that's already decided you're one of us. Evan caught her hands, stilling her frantic movement. You don't have to run. Not anymore. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what he's capable of. Then tell me. Help me understand what we're dealing with. She pulled her hands away, wrapped her arms around herself. His name is Marcus Whitfield. He owns 3 car dealerships in Seattle. Successful, charming, everyone loves him. Donates to charity, coaches Little League, perfect community member. Her voice turned bitter. And behind closed doors, he's a monster. Not the kind that hits you where bruises show. The kind that breaks you down piece by piece until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Did he ever physically hurt you? Sometimes. When words weren't enough, but mostly it was control. Who I talked to, what I wore, when I slept, what I ate. Everything had rules and consequences for breaking them. She touched the scar on her wrist unconsciously. This was from when I tried to leave the first time, 3 years ago. He found me at my sister's house, brought me home, and... She stopped, her breathing ragged. I didn't try again until that night you found me. Evan felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. He forced it down, kept his voice steady. He can't control you anymore. You're not that person who believed his lies. But he still has power, money, connections, the ability to make my life hell if he wants to. He could claim I stole from him, destroyed property, anything to get me arrested. He could drag me through courts I can't afford to fight in. Her voice broke. He could win just by making it too expensive for me to keep fighting. Not if we fight back first. Rita's nephew is already working on the restraining order. We document everything. His presence here, his attempts to contact you, all of it. We build a case that protects you legally. Legal protection doesn't stop someone who doesn't care about laws. Maybe not, but it's a start, and you're not facing this alone. Lena looked at him with such raw desperation it hurt. Why are you doing this? You could just ask me to leave. Keep yourself and Sophie safe. That would be the smart thing. The smart thing would have been not picking you up that night, not bringing you home, not letting myself care. Evan stepped closer. But I did all those things, and now we're here. And I'm not walking away just because it got complicated. It's more than complicated. It's dangerous. I know, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. Something in Lena's expression crumbled. She moved into his arms without thinking, pressing her face against his chest. Evan held her carefully, feeling her shake with silent sobs she'd probably been holding back for years. I'm so tired of being scared, she whispered against his shirt. I know, but you're allowed to be scared and still stay. Fear doesn't mean you have to run. They stood like that until her breathing evened out, until Sophie came downstairs asking what was for lunch and whether they could go feed the ducks at the park. Lena pulled away, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. We're not going far today, Evan said to Sophie. We're staying close to home. Why? Is something wrong? He exchanged a look with Lena. They talked about how much to tell Sophie, how to balance honesty with age-appropriate information. Lena's ex-husband might be in town, Evan said carefully. He's not a good person, so we're being extra careful for a while. Sophie's face went serious. Is he the one who hurt her? Yes. Then we should call the police and have him arrested. It's not that simple, Bug, but we're working on it. He knelt down to her level. What I need from you is to be aware. Don't talk to strangers. Don't go anywhere without telling me first. And if you see someone hanging around who seems off, you tell me immediately. Okay? Okay. I can do that. I'm very responsible. She looked at Lena. Don't worry, we'll keep you safe. That's what families do. Lena's eyes filled again. Sophie hugged her fiercely, and Evan felt his heart expand with pride for his daughter's simple, absolute certainty that protection was what you offered people you cared about. The next few days were tense, where Morrison increased patrols. Rita kept watch at the bakery. The whole town seemed to quietly mobilize, the way small communities do when one of their own is threatened. Mrs. Patterson mentioned she'd seen a strange car parked on Main Street. Mr. Chen reported a man asking questions about newcomers to town. The information flowed through the Pine Haven network, everyone on alert. Marcus never approached directly, but his presence was felt, a shadow at the edge of their awareness, watching, waiting. Lena threw herself into work and routine, as if staying busy could keep the fear at bay. She helped Sophie with her costume, taught Evan her bread-making technique, worked extra shifts at the bakery. But Evan saw the toll it took. The circles under her eyes, the way she jumped at unexpected sounds, the nightmares that had her pacing at 3 a.m. A week after Rita's call, Rita's nephew came through with the restraining order. Marcus Whitfield was legally barred from contacting Lena or coming within 500 feet of her. Morrison served the papers personally, driving to the motel where Marcus was staying. He didn't take it well, Morrison reported that evening. Lots of talk about his rights, his property, how he just wants to talk to his wife. Classic abuser language. Did he agree to leave town? Evan asked. He's got 24 hours. After that, he's in violation just by being in Pine Haven. Morrison looked at Lena. This doesn't mean you're completely safe. Restraining orders are paper. They work for people who care about consequences, but they're also documentation, evidence if he violates them. You did the right thing. Lena nodded, looking exhausted. Thank you. After Morrison left, she disappeared into her room. Evan gave her space for an hour, then knocked softly. Come in, she said quietly. He found her sitting on the bed, staring out the window at the darkening forest. You okay? I don't know. I should feel relieved. He has to leave. Legally, he can't come near me. But all I can think is how paper doesn't stop bullets. How restraining orders just make some men angrier. She looked at him. What if this makes things worse? What if it makes things better? What if he actually leaves and you get to build a life here without looking over your shoulder? People like Marcus don't just leave. They find ways around rules. Then we deal with that if it happens, not before. Evan sat beside her on the bed. You can't live your whole life preparing for worst-case scenarios. That's how I survived the last 4 years, always expecting the worst so I wouldn't be blindsided. You're not surviving anymore. You're living. There's a difference. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture familiar now. I want to believe that. I'm just not sure I remember how to live without fear. You're learning. I see it every day. The way you laugh with Sophie. The way you lose yourself in baking. The moments when you forget to be on guard. He paused. Those moments are getting longer. That's progress. What if it's not enough? What if I'm too broken to ever be whole again? Evan turned to face her fully. You're not broken. You're someone who went through hell and came out the other side. The scars are proof you survived, not proof you failed. She studied his face like she was trying to memorize it. How do you always know what to say? I don't. I'm making this up as I go, same as you. You're better at it than I am. I've had more practice. And I had people who helped me learn. Now I'm trying to be that person for you. Lena's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. I don't know what I did to deserve you in my life. You showed up, that's all. You were brave enough to accept help when every instinct told you to run. That's deserving enough. They sat in the quiet room as night fell completely. Outside, an owl called through the trees. Marmalade appeared in the doorway, meowed once, and jumped onto the bed between them. Even the cat knows when someone needs comfort, Lena said, stroking Marmalade's fur. She's a good judge of character. If she trusts you, you must be doing something right. The next morning brought news that Marcus had checked out of the motel. Morrison confirmed he'd crossed the county line heading west. The collective tension in Pine Haven eased slightly, though everyone remained watchful. He could come back, Morrison warned. The order is permanent, but enforcement depends on him respecting it. Stay alert. But days passed without incident. Then a week. Then 2. Life began to settle into a new normal. Lena worked at the bakery, lived in Evan's spare room, and slowly unfurled like a plant that had finally found sunlight. Sophie's school play arrived with all the chaos and excitement of elementary theater. Lena helped with last-minute costume repairs, sitting in Evan's workshop with a needle and thread, fixing sequins that had come loose and hems that had unraveled. I've never been to a school play before, she admitted as she worked. Never? Evan looked up from the program he was reading. Marcus didn't like me going places without him. School events were full of other parents, other families. He said it made him uncomfortable. He wanted to isolate you. I know that now. Then I just thought I was being a good wife, supporting his comfort over my own desires. She bit off a thread. It's strange what you can convince yourself is normal when someone chips away at you long enough. You're here now. That's what matters. I keep waiting for permission to be happy, to enjoy things, like my brain hasn't caught up to the fact that I'm allowed to just exist without checking if it's okay first. Give yourself time. Your brain spent years in survival mode. It needs to relearn safety. Sophie burst into the workshop, already in her Munchkin costume. How do I look? Am I the most beautiful Munchkin you've ever seen? Absolutely stunning, Lena said solemnly. The most beautiful Munchkin in all of Oz. That's what I thought too. Sophie twirled, making her skirt flare. Are you both coming to watch? You have to come. Mrs. Patterson says family support is very important for performers. We'll both be there, Evan promised. Front row, if we can manage it. Good. Because I have a solo in the Lollipop Guild song, and I need people to clap really loud so everyone knows I did a good job. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents and grandparents armed with cameras and smartphones. Evan and Lena found seats near the front, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of small-town community events. People Evan had known for years stopped to say hello, to be introduced to Lena, to welcome her with the casual assumption of belonging that Pine Haven offered to anyone who'd earned Rita's approval. "Everyone's so friendly," Lena whispered as another neighbor waved. "That's Pine Haven. You're Rita's employee and you've been seen with me enough times. That makes you officially part of the community whether you meant to be or not." "I'm not sure I know how to be part of a community." "You just show up, participate, let people care about you. You're already doing it." The lights dimmed and the play began with all the charming imperfection of children's theater. Lines were forgotten, props fell over, the tornado sound effects were more alarming than intended. But Sophie shone in her small role, singing her solo with confidence and only minor pitch issues. Evan watched his daughter and felt the familiar swell of pride mixed with the ever-present ache of wishing Charlotte could see this. 6 years and the grief still ambushed him at moments like these, reminding him of everything she'd missed. Lena must have sensed something because her hand found his in the darkness, squeezing gently. A silent acknowledgement that loss was allowed to exist alongside joy, that you could celebrate the moment while missing the people who should have been there to share it. After the play, Sophie ran to them with her face flushed from excitement and stage lights. "Did you see? Did you hear my solo? Was I good?" "You were perfect," Lena said, pulling her into a hug. "The best Munchkin in the history of Munchkins," Evan added. Sophie beamed. "Mrs. Patterson said we can have the costumes. Can I keep mine, please?" "Of course you can keep it." "Good, because I want to wear it for Halloween, even though Halloween is really far away, but I don't care because it's a really good costume." They walked to the car through the parking lot, Sophie chattering between them about who forgot their lines and how the Wicked Witch's makeup was really scary up close. Evan felt Lena's hand slip into his again, this time without the excuse of comfort. "Thank you for bringing me," she said quietly. "This was nice. Normal nice." "You're welcome, but you don't need to thank me for including you in normal things. You belong here." She looked up at him, something shifting in her expression. "I'm starting to believe that." That night, after Sophie was asleep still wearing her Munchkin costume, Evan found Lena on the porch. She'd brought out 2 glasses of wine, had one waiting for him. "I've been thinking," she said as he sat beside her. "About what?" "About how long I can stay here, in your house, using your space and your resources and your patience." Evan's stomach tightened. "Are you thinking about leaving?" "No, that's the problem. I'm not thinking about leaving at all. I'm thinking about staying, indefinitely, and that scares me because I don't want to take advantage of your kindness, or assume this is permanent when it might just be temporary shelter." "What do you want it to be?" The question hung between them. Lena took a long sip of wine before answering. "I want it to be real. I want this—" She gestured at the cabin, the forest, the life they'd been building, "to be my actual life. Not just a safe place I'm borrowing until I figure out something better. But I don't know if I have the right to want that." "Why wouldn't you?" "Because I'm still legally married, because I come with enough baggage to fill a warehouse, because you deserve someone whole and uncomplicated who can give you everything without bringing disaster to your doorstep." She set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "Because I'm falling for you, and I don't know if that's real or just trauma bonding or gratitude disguised as something more." Evan's heart was pounding. "And if it is real? Then I'm terrified I'll ruin it. That I'll wake up one day and realize I don't know how to be in a healthy relationship because I've never had one. That I'll hurt you or Sophie trying to figure out who I am outside of being someone's victim." "Lena." He turned to face her fully. "I'm falling for you too. Have been since the night you left that note. Maybe before. And yeah, it's complicated and messy, and we're both carrying grief and trauma that doesn't just disappear, but that doesn't make it less real. How can you be sure?" "I can't. Not completely. But I know that when you're around, this house feels like a home again, instead of just a place where Sophie and I exist. I know that you make me want to take risks I've been avoiding for 6 years. I know that watching you heal has been one of the most profound experiences of my life." He paused. "And I know that whether this is trauma bonding or gratitude or actual love doesn't really matter right now. What matters is we're both here, both trying, both willing to see where this goes." Lena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I can't promise I won't be difficult, or that I won't have bad days where I can't function, or that Marcus won't come back and make everything exponentially worse. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty and effort and the willingness to keep showing up even when it's hard. Can you do that? I think so. I want to. Then that's enough. We'll figure out the rest as we go. She leaned into him, and this time when he wrapped his arms around her, it felt less like comfort and more like choice. Like two people consciously deciding to build something together instead of just surviving in proximity. I need to file for divorce, Lena said quietly. Rita's nephew says he can handle it, but it means confronting Marcus in court, possibly seeing him again. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. And you won't be alone. I'll be there. Rita will be there. Sophie would probably insist on coming too if we let her. A wet laugh escaped Lena. She would. She's fiercely protective for a 6-year-old. She gets it from her mother. Charlotte was like that too. Defender of underdogs and champion of lost causes. Am I a lost cause? No. You're someone who found her way out of the dark. That's the opposite of lost. They sat together as the night deepened around them, making quiet plans for a future that felt impossibly fragile and impossibly real at the same time. The divorce proceedings, the legal separation from Marcus, the slow work of building a life that belonged entirely to Lena. And maybe, eventually, building something together. Not rushing, not forcing, just letting whatever this was between them grow at its own pace. Inside, Marmalade meowed at the door, demanding entry. Lena stood to let her in, and when she came back, she sat closer to Evan than before. Close enough that their shoulders touched. Close enough that the space between them felt like possibility instead of distance. Thank you, she said softly. I thought we were past thank you. We are. But I'm saying it anyway. Thank you for seeing me, for believing I was worth saving, for giving me space to figure out who I am when no one's telling me what to be. Evan kissed the top of her head, a gesture that felt both new and inevitable. You're welcome. Now stop thanking me and help me figure out how to tell Sophie that her favorite munchkin is about to become a permanent resident. I think she already knows. She asked me yesterday if I was going to live here forever. What did you tell her? I said maybe, that we were figuring it out. And what did she say? Lena smiled. She said maybe means yes if you're patient enough. Then she went back to playing with Marmalade like she'd solved all our problems with pure 6-year-old logic. She might have. Patience isn't a bad strategy. They finished their wine in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The divorce proceedings, the constant awareness that Marcus might return, the work of healing that never really ended. But tonight they had this. The quiet porch, the cool spring air, the feeling of choosing each other despite every reasonable argument against it. And for now, that was more than enough. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in late May, delivered by a courier who seemed oblivious to the weight of what he carried. Lena signed for the envelope with hands that barely shook, a marked improvement from the woman who'd trembled at every unexpected sound just months ago. He contested it, she said, scanning the documents at the kitchen table. Of course he did. Marcus never let anything go without a fight. Evan looked up from the cutting board where he was slicing strawberries for Sophie's lunch. What's his argument? Abandonment. He's claiming I left without cause, took marital property, and he's demanding I return to Seattle for mediation. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told a different story. He wants me back in his territory, where he has control. You don't have to go. Rita's nephew can handle everything remotely. I know, but part of me wants to face him, to look him in the eye and show him I'm not the broken thing he tried to create. She set down the papers. Does that make me crazy? It makes you human, but wanting to prove something to him and actually needing to are different things. Sophie wandered in, still in her pajamas, Marmalade trailing behind her. Why does Lena look worried? Did something bad happen? Just paperwork bug, Evan said, adult stuff. But Sophie was too perceptive for deflection. She climbed into the chair beside Lena, studying her face with the serious intensity she brought to important matters. Is it about the mean man? Your husband who hurt you? Lena's eyes widened slightly. They'd been careful about what Sophie overheard, but clearly not careful enough. Yes, Lena said, deciding on honesty. I'm trying to officially stop being married to him, but he's making it complicated. Why would he want to stay married to someone who doesn't want to be married to him? That seems dumb. It is dumb, but some people have a hard time accepting when things are over. Sophie considered this with the philosophical gravitas of childhood. Daddy says when something's broken, you either fix it or let it go. You can't fix mean people, so he should let you go. Your daddy is very wise, Lena said softly. I know. He knows lots of things, like how to build furniture and make good pancakes and help people who are sad. Sophie reached over and patted Lena's hand. Don't worry. We won't let the mean man take you back. You live here now, with us. After Sophie ran off to get dressed, Lena sat quietly, staring at the legal documents. She's right, you know. I do live here now. This is my home. When did that happen? Gradually, then all at once. Evan sat across from her. You don't owe Marcus an explanation or a confrontation. You owe yourself peace. Whatever gets you there fastest is the right choice. Rita's nephew thinks we can push for an uncontested divorce based on the abuse documentation. The restraining order helps. The sheriff's reports help. My testimony helps. She paused. But Marcus has money for lawyers who'll drag this out, make it expensive and painful. He doesn't need to win. He just needs to make me suffer enough that I give up. Then we make sure you don't give up. We match him lawyer for lawyer if we have to. I can't afford. We'll figure it out. Rita's nephew is working pro bono, and I've got savings. Charlotte's life insurance that I've barely touched because I didn't know what to do with it. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Money's just money. It's supposed to be used for things that matter. Lena's eyes filled. I can't take your wife's life insurance money. Charlotte would want it used to help someone rebuild their life. She was like that, always looking out for people who needed it. He squeezed her hand gently. Let me do this, please. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. I'm not keeping a ledger. This isn't a transaction. It's just what you do for people. He stopped, the weight of what he was about to say hanging between them. People you what? Lena asked softly. People you love. The words settled into the quiet kitchen like stones in still water. Neither of them moved. Outside, a bird sang its morning song. Somewhere down the hall, Sophie was singing too, making up lyrics about munchkins and rainbow bridges. I love you too, Lena whispered. I'm terrified of it. I don't trust it yet. But it's there. Evan stood, moved around the table, pulled her up into his arms. She came willingly, pressing her face against his chest. They'd held each other before, comfort holds, friendly embraces, the careful touching of two people learning each other's boundaries. But this felt different. This was acknowledgement, declaration. The conscious choice to move from maybe to yes. We don't have to rush anything, Evan said into her hair. Love doesn't require a timeline. I know, but I want you to know it's real. That this isn't just gratitude or dependency or, I know, I've known for a while. She pulled back enough to look at him. How? The way you look at Sophie. The way you've made this cabin feel lived in instead of just survived in. The way you laugh now without checking if it's allowed. He touched her face gently. The way you're fighting for your freedom instead of running. That's not what someone does when they're just grateful. That's what someone does when they've found something worth staying for. Lena kissed him. Not hesitant or questioning, but certain. A kiss that tasted like coffee and promise and the particular sweetness of choosing joy after surviving darkness. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Daddy, Lena, are you kissing? Sophie's voice came from the hallway, delighted and scandalous. I saw you. You were definitely kissing. We were, Evan confirmed, not letting go of Lena. Sophie appeared in the doorway, grinning like she'd solved a mystery. Does this mean Lena's going to be my new mommy? Sophie, Evan started. I mean, I know she's not my real mommy because my real mommy died, but she could be like a bonus mommy. Mrs. Patterson says bonus parents are just as good as regular parents. Sophie looked at Lena hopefully. Would you want to be my bonus mom? Lena crouched down to Sophie's level, her eyes bright. I would be honored to be your bonus mom, if that's what you want. It's what I want. I've wanted it for a while, but I didn't want to be pushy. Daddy says being pushy is rude. You're not pushy. You're perfect. Lena pulled Sophie into a hug. And I love you very much. I love you too. Can we have pancakes to celebrate? Celebrations require pancakes. They made pancakes together, the three of them working in the small kitchen with the easy coordination of people who'd found their rhythm. Sophie chattered about school and her friend Emma, who had two moms, and how that made her an expert on bonus parents. Lena and Evan kept catching each other's eyes, smiling at the absurdity and perfection of the moment. Later, after Sophie left for school, they called Rita's nephew to discuss strategy for the divorce. Jackson Chen was 35, sharp as a knife, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting his clients. Marcus is trying to intimidate you, Jackson said over speakerphone. The mediation demand, the property claims, all of it. He thinks if he makes enough noise, you'll fold. Classic abuser tactic. What do we do? Lena asked. We ignore the noise. File a counter motion citing the restraining order and documented abuse. Push for dissolution based on irreconcilable differences and safety concerns. Washington is a no-fault state, which works in our favor. He can contest all he wants, but the law says if you want a divorce, you get one. How long will it take? If he keeps fighting, could be 6 months, could be a year. But here's the thing. Every motion he files, every delay tactic he uses, it costs him money too, and it creates more documentation of harassment. Eventually his lawyers will advise him to settle because dragging it out just makes him look worse. Evan leaned toward the phone. What about the restraining order? Does that stay in effect? Absolutely, and we'll request it be made permanent as part of the divorce settlement, along with a no-contact clause and agreement that any communication goes through lawyers only. Jackson's voice softened slightly. Lena, I know this is hard, but you're doing everything right. You got out. You documented the abuse. You're letting the legal system protect you. A lot of survivors never get this far. After they hung up, Lena sat quietly, processing. Evan made more coffee, gave her space to think. A year, she finally said. I could be legally tied to him for another year. Or 6 months. Or less if he gives up. Marcus doesn't give up. That's the problem. He'll see this as a challenge, something to win. Then let him waste his money and energy fighting a battle that's already over. You're here. You're safe. You're building a new life. He can't take that away no matter how many lawyers he hires. Lena stood, moved to the window overlooking the garden where early vegetables were starting to sprout. I planted those seeds, she said quietly. Me. I chose what to plant, when to water them, how to arrange them. Such a small thing. But it's the first time in years I've made decisions about growing something just because I wanted to. That's what freedom looks like. Small choices that belong entirely to you. I want more of that. More moments where I'm just living instead of strategizing survival. More mornings where I wake up and think about what I want to do instead of what I'm allowed to do. She turned to face him. I want to marry you someday. Not right away. Not until I'm actually divorced and healed and sure I can be a good partner, but someday. I want that future. Evan crossed the room, pulled her close. I want that too. And we've got time. All the time you need. The summer unfolded in careful increments. Lena worked at the bakery, saving money and learning recipes. Rita was talking about retiring in a few years. Maybe selling the business to someone who'd keep it going. The implications hung unspoken but present. Evan took on more custom furniture orders, building the dining tables and bed frames that would fill other people's homes with the same warmth he'd found in his own. Sophie thrived with the addition of Lena to their family, her world expanding to include baking lessons and gardening projects, and the particular security that came from having two adults who loved her. In July, Marcus's lawyers filed another motion, then another in August. Each time Jackson countered swiftly and efficiently. The pattern became clear. Marcus was testing, probing for weakness, trying to find a way to regain control. But every motion failed. Every attempt to force Lena back to Seattle was denied. He's running out of options, Jackson reported in September. His lawyers are starting to hint at settlement. They know they can't win, and continuing to fight just makes their client look obsessive and controlling, which, given the restraining order, isn't a good look. What kind of settlement? Lena asked. Clean break. You keep whatever assets you have now, he keeps everything else. No alimony either direction. Permanent no contact order. Basically, you each walk away and never speak again. That's all I've ever wanted. Then we push for it. Final offer. Take it, or we go to court and air all his dirty laundry in public record. Most abusers don't want that kind of exposure. 2 weeks later, Marcus agreed to the settlement. The papers arrived on a Friday afternoon. Lena signed them at the kitchen table, the same place where this phase of her life had begun months ago. Her hand was steady, her signature was clear. When she set down the pen, she sat very still. "Are you okay?" Evan asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel more. Relief or joy or something, but I just feel..." She searched for the word. "Quiet. Like a war just ended and I'm not sure what to do with peace." "Give yourself time to adjust. You've been in fight or flight mode for years. Your nervous system needs to catch up to the fact that the threat is actually gone." Sophie came home from school to find them sitting together at the table, the signed divorce papers between them. "Is it done?" she asked. "Are you really free now?" "Really free," Lena confirmed. Sophie threw her arms around Lena's neck. "Good. Now we can celebrate. We should have a party. A freedom party with cake and balloons and maybe fireworks if Daddy says we can." "Oh, fireworks might be excessive," Evan said. "Freedom is never excessive. Freedom is important. We learned about it in school. People fight wars for freedom." "She's not wrong," Lena said, smiling. "Maybe just cake and balloons, though." They had the party that weekend. Rita came, bringing pastries and her gruff affection. Morrison stopped by, officially off duty, but there nonetheless, representing the town's investment in Lena's safety. Mrs. Patterson brought flowers from her garden. Mr. Chen contributed tea cookies and stories about his own immigration journey to freedom. The cabin filled with people who'd quietly rallied around a stranger because she'd become one of them. Because in Pine Haven, you took care of your own. And Lena was undeniably their own now. As evening fell and the guests filtered away, Evan found Lena on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "Thank you for this," she said as he sat beside her. "The party, the support, all of it. You deserve to be celebrated. I'm not used to that. Being the center of attention for good reasons instead of scrutiny. Get used to it, because I plan on celebrating you as often as possible." She leaned into him, and they swayed gently, the old swing creaking beneath them. Inside, Sophie was showing Marmalade how to play with the balloon strings, her laughter drifting through the open window. "I've been thinking," Lena said, "about Rita's bakery, about what happens when she retires. And I think I want to buy it. Not right away. I need to save more, learn more, make sure I can actually run a business. But eventually, I want to own something, build something that's entirely mine." Evan smiled. "Rita would love that. She's been worried about finding the right person to take over." "You think I could do it? Actually run a whole bakery?" "I think you could do anything you set your mind to. You've already done the hardest thing. You saved yourself. Everything else is just details." Lena was quiet for a moment. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Marcus to violate the order or for something to go wrong. I don't know how to just be happy without waiting for it to be taken away. That's the last piece of healing. Learning to trust that good things can last. That you're allowed to build a life without constantly preparing for it to collapse." He turned to face her. "We're not going anywhere. This isn't temporary. You're not going to wake up and find it was all a dream. Promise?" "Promise." She kissed him as the sun dropped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "I should probably find my own place eventually," Lena said. "Stop monopolizing your spare room." "Or," Evan said carefully, "you could stay, permanently. Move your stuff from the spare room to my room. Make this officially your home instead of just where you're staying." Lena's eyes widened. "You want me to move into your bedroom? I want you to move into my life, completely. No more spare room, no more temporary arrangements. Just us, building something together." He paused. "Unless that's too fast. We can wait if you need more time." "I don't need more time. I need you. I need this. I need to stop being afraid that wanting things will make them disappear. She cupped his face in her hands. Yes, I'll move into your room, into your life, into whatever future we're building. They told Sophie over breakfast the next morning. Her reaction was predictable and loud. Finally, I've been waiting forever for you two to figure it out. She bounced in her chair. Does this mean we're a real family now? Like, officially? We've been a real family for a while, Bug, Evan said. This just makes it more official. Can I call Lena Mom? Because saying Lena feels weird now that she's going to live in Daddy's room and be here forever. Lena's breath caught. Evan watched her carefully, ready to intervene if it was too much. But Lena's eyes were bright with joy, not panic. You can call me whatever feels right to you, Lena said softly. Mom, Lena, bonus mom, whatever makes you comfortable. Sophie considered this with her usual seriousness. I think Mom for when it's just us. And Lena for when we're around other people so they don't get confused. Is that okay? That's perfect. They spent the day rearranging the house. Lena's few belongings moved from the spare room to Evan's, now their, bedroom. It didn't take long. She still didn't own much, but each item was chosen, not just grabbed in panic. Each piece represented a decision she'd made about who she wanted to be. That night, lying in bed together for the first time as something more than friends sharing space, Lena traced patterns on Evan's chest. I never thought I'd have this, she said quietly. Safety, love, a family. I'd given up on the idea that life could be gentle. You don't have to give up on anything anymore. You get to want things and work toward them and believe they'll last. I'm still learning how to do that. Want things for myself instead of just surviving what other people want from me. What do you want right now? She smiled. This, you. Sophie asleep down the hall. Marmalade probably destroying something in the living room. A future where I get to decide what tomorrow looks like. She paused. And maybe, eventually, to expand this family. If you want more kids someday. Evan's heart stuttered. You want kids? I think so. Not right away, but someday, when I'm more healed, when we're more settled. I want to experience pregnancy and parenthood without fear. Want to raise a child who never has to learn that love can be dangerous. She looked at him. Is that something you'd want? Yeah, I always thought I'd have more kids before Charlotte died. But after, it felt impossible, like I'd used up my chance at that kind of family. He pulled her closer. But with you, it feels possible again, someday, when we're ready. They fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd survived their own separate hells and found each other in the aftermath. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic wand that erased trauma or grief. But there was this, the choice to build something good in the space between past pain and future hope. The autumn brought change in layers. Lena started taking business classes online, preparing for the eventual purchase of Rita's bakery. Evan expanded his workshop, taking on an apprentice from the local high school who wanted to learn traditional woodworking. Sophie started second grade with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved absolutely and without condition. And slowly, carefully, Lena's nightmares decreased. The hypervigilance softened. She still had bad days, moments when something would trigger the old fear. But they became less frequent. And when they came, she had people to help her through them. In November, a letter arrived from Marcus's lawyer. Not a threat or emotion, just notification that Marcus had remarried. Someone new to control, some fresh victim who probably thought she was lucky to have caught his attention. Lena read the letter once, then burned it in the fireplace. Should we warn her? She asked, watching the paper curl and blacken. The new wife. Should we try to tell her what she's getting into? Evan considered this. Would you have listened if someone had warned you? No, probably not. I thought I was special, that our love was different, that I could fix him or save him or make him better. She paused. I had to learn the hard way. Then maybe she does too. It's terrible, but sometimes people can't hear the truth until they're ready for it. I know. I just hate that someone else has to go through what I did. You can't save everyone. You can only save yourself. That's not selfish, it's survival. Lena nodded slowly. I choose to believe she'll find her way out eventually, like I did. And maybe when she does, she'll find her own version of this. People who help without asking for payment, a place where she can be safe while she figures out who she is without him. Christmas came with snow and celebration. Sophie's list for Santa was extensive and mostly focused on presents for other people. Lena baked enough cookies to feed the entire town. Evan built Sophie a dollhouse from scrap wood and careful attention, each room detailed and perfect. On Christmas morning, after presents were opened and breakfast was eaten, Evan gave Lena a small wrapped box. "This isn't an engagement ring," he said as she held it. "Not yet, but it's a promise that one day it will be." Inside was a pendant, a simple wooden heart on a silver chain, handcrafted, obviously made with the same skill Evan brought to his furniture work. "It's made from the wood of that old oak by the creek," Evan explained. "The tree that was here when Sophie learned to walk. When I was grieving Charlotte and learning to be a single parent. When you showed up and reminded me that life could be more than just survival." He fastened it around her neck. "It's a piece of home, something to carry with you always." Lena touched the pendant, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole impossible, beautiful life is perfect." "It's not perfect, but it's ours." Sophie came running in, demanding they come see the snowman she was building with Marmalade's help. They bundled up and went outside, playing in the snow until their fingers were numb and their cheeks were red. Later, warming up with hot chocolate by the fire, Lena realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd checked over her shoulder. Couldn't remember the last nightmare. Couldn't remember the feeling of walking on eggshells, waiting for the next blow to fall. She was healing, really, truly healing. The seasons turned. Winter gave way to spring. The garden they'd planted together burst into life. Tomatoes and herbs and flowers Sophie had insisted on adding because pretty things matter too. The bakery business classes continued. Evan's furniture orders increased. Sophie grew like a weed, losing teeth and gaining independence in equal measure. And one evening in May, exactly 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Evan took Lena back to the pier where he'd found her. "Why are we here?" she asked, looking at the weathered dock with a mixture of unease and curiosity. "Because this is where your second life started, where you stopped running and let someone help. I wanted to show you how far you've come." They walked to the end of the pier, the same spot where she'd sat desperate and afraid. Now she stood tall, whole, free. "I was so broken that night," she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd survive till morning. Couldn't imagine a future that didn't hurt. And now? Now I can't imagine a future without you in it, without Sophie and Marmalade and Rita and this whole ridiculous, wonderful town." She turned to him. "Now I know what happiness feels like. Real happiness, not the conditional kind that depends on perfect behavior and constant vigilance." Evan dropped to one knee. Lena's hands flew to her mouth. "I know I said the pendant wasn't an engagement ring yet," Evan said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "But yet has arrived. Lena, you've taught me that healing is possible, that love can be gentle, that family is something you build with intention and care. Will you marry me? Will you officially become Sophie's mom and my wife and the person I get to wake up next to for the rest of my life?" "Yes." The word came out choked with tears and joy. "Yes. Absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a simple band with 3 small stones. "The stones represent the 3 of us. You, me, and Sophie. A family." Lena pulled him up and kissed him with the wholehearted certainty of someone who'd finally learned to trust good things. They were married in August in Rita's garden, surrounded by everyone who'd helped Lena find her way home. Sophie was the flower girl, taking her job so seriously she walked at a funeral pace down the aisle. Marmalade wore a ribbon and mostly behaved. Rita cried, which shocked everyone who'd only ever seen her gruff exterior. The vows were simple: promises to love and support and grow together. Promises to build a life based on trust and respect and the kind of safety that came from knowing you could be your full self without fear. When they were pronounced married, Sophie cheered louder than anyone. "Finally, I've been waiting for this forever." "It's been a year, Bug," Evan said, laughing. "That's forever when you're 7. At the reception, dancing under string lights in Rita's garden, Lena leaned into Evan and whispered, "I'm happy." Actually, completely happy. Is this what normal people feel all the time? I think normal people feel happy sometimes and stressed sometimes and everything in between. But yeah, this is what it feels like when happiness is real and earned and built on solid ground. I like it. I want to keep it. Then we will, for as long as we're both breathing. They danced until the stars came out. Sophie fell asleep on a blanket with marmalade curled beside her. Rita announced she was officially retiring and selling the bakery to Lena at a price that was suspiciously reasonable. Morrison toasted to new beginnings and second chances. And as the night wound down and the guests filtered away, Evan and Lena sat on Rita's porch swing with Sophie sleeping between them, looking at their future with clear eyes and full hearts. "Thank you for finding me," Lena said quietly, "for seeing someone worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. Thank you for staying, for trusting me, for choosing this life instead of running from it. I'll choose it every day. This life, this family, this love, every single day." Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbled something about munchkins, then settled again. Lena smoothed her hair gently, the gesture as natural as breathing. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of joy. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it define the future. Not being rescued, but being supported while you saved yourself. Lena had started her second life on a pier in the rain, broken and desperate. She'd built it into something beautiful through courage and help and the willingness to believe she deserved better. And now, surrounded by love and safety and the promise of all the tomorrows to come, she was finally, completely home. The story could have ended there, with the wedding and the promises and the pretty picture of happily ever after. But life continued in the ways both mundane and meaningful. Lena bought the bakery and renamed it Second Rise, a play on bread making and new beginnings that made Rita laugh so hard she cried. The business thrived under Lena's careful management, becoming a gathering place for the community in ways that went beyond pastries and coffee. Evan's furniture business grew until he had more orders than he could handle alone. He took on 2 more apprentices, teaching them the craft while building pieces that would outlast them all. Sophie grew into a thoughtful, compassionate teenager who volunteered at the local women's shelter, helping others the way her family had helped her mom. She never forgot where they'd come from, never took for granted the safety and love that filled their home. And 3 years after the wedding, Lena gave birth to twin boys, Graham and Oliver, who looked like Evan but had Lena's dark eyes. The delivery was smooth, the recovery gentle, the experience everything she'd hoped it could be. Holding her sons for the first time, surrounded by her husband and daughter, Lena wept with gratitude for the life she'd built from nothing. Marcus never contacted her again. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to California, that his second marriage had also ended, that he'd finally faced consequences when his third wife pressed charges. Lena felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he was someone else's problem now. She'd learned that healing wasn't about revenge or justice or even closure. It was about building something so good, so solid, so completely yours that the past became irrelevant. Just a story about someone you used to be before you learned to be free. On the 5-year anniversary of that night on the pier, Lena and Evan returned to the spot with Sophie and the twins. They'd brought flowers to scatter on the water, a symbolic letting go of the woman who'd once sat there drowning. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked, now 12 and increasingly philosophical, having to go through all that to get here? Lena considered the question seriously. "I regret that it happened. I wish I could have found this life without the trauma, but I don't regret surviving it, because it taught me what strength looks like, what love should feel like, who I am when no one's telling me who to be." She looked at her family, her husband who'd chosen kindness over caution, her daughter who'd welcomed her with open arms, her sons who would grow up knowing that love was supposed to be gentle and safe and given freely. "This life was worth fighting for," Lena said. "Every hard day, every nightmare, every moment of fear that I pushed through to get here. Worth it." They scattered the flowers and watched them drift downstream, carried by the current toward whatever came next. Then they went home together, to the cabin that had become a haven, to the life they'd built one choice at a time. And Lena Brooks, no longer running, no longer afraid, no longer anything but exactly who she chose to be, walked into her future with her head high and her heart whole, knowing that some stories have happy endings, not because they avoid darkness, but because they find light on the other side of it.